want to thank all of you for being here. This is a wonderful turnout. It is so wonderful to see all of your faces. You all have become so incredibly important to me personally and to each other. When we are not able to be together, what we do is we recognize how important our connections to each other really are. And I didn't realize that when I was training to be district governor for this year, when we learned what our theme this year, which is Rotary Connects the World, I don't think any of us believed that that connection was going to be so important to us in this way, because none of us could have forecast that we would be here during this Rotary year. But the connection is what is helping a lot of us get through on this. So I want to just thank you all for taking the time to be with us, for your interest. I think we've got a wonderful program today. And I think this is just going to be a great time for us to be together as the family of Rotary in District 5440. I wanted to talk a little bit about the rules of the road on how this is going to work. You'll notice most of you are muted. I think as you're coming into the meeting, Kelly has it set up so that we're all muted. The reason we do that is that helps save a lot of the background noise that happens in everybody's lives when your clocks go off, when your phone rings, when your dog barks, when your kid runs around the house, any number of things. It becomes very distracting for everybody when we have this many people in the room. So you'll remain muted, and the people that are speaking will be unmuted so that you get as clear a message from them as we go through the day as possible. You can go up, if you look in your upper right of your screen, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can be on a gallery view that looks like 9 little dots. That's where you'll see everybody page by page, and we're up to 4 pages now of people. And there's little arrows on the side of your screen that you can hit that blue arrow and refresh with some more of the people that are here. So if you want to see them, you can do that. The other thing that you can do and that we're recommending you do is go to the speaker view, because Mark Holdt, our guest speaker today, is going to be sharing his screen with a PowerPoint presentation. And so that's going to take up a big part of your screen. If you do the speaker view and he speaks, you'll be able to see him. So you might want to think about doing that, and you can practice it back and forth to see what works the best for you. A lot of you are getting to be really good at using Zoom because we're using it for so many different things as we go through. So keep that in mind. You can post your questions in the chat function. And again, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little toolbar that's got several different items on it. One of them is chat. If you bring up that chat, you can post a question in that chat, and that's how we're going to be asking you to post questions so that we don't have too many people trying to talk at one time. That way, Kelly will be able to record what the questions are, and Mark will get back to you and answer each of your questions via email. And she'll also be able to catch that. And this meeting is being recorded so that if you know somebody that would benefit from this that isn't able to attend this morning, it will be up on the website so that they can actually look at it. So hopefully you'll all get a little bit of a lesson on how to do Zoom today. We've got a great program today. We'll be hearing from Mark Holdt and Les Glover up in Estes Park. Also going to hear a message from past District Governor Chuck Rutenberg, who is our District Rotary Foundation Chair, and then Lee Vera Nelson, our District Governor nominee designate. We'll be talking just a brief bit about membership. And I think, Kelly, we are scheduled for 2 hours. Is that correct? 2:11. Great. I'm hopeful that this works out really, really well, because this is something we've talked about wanting to put together over many years because of the size of our district. And this may be, if this is successful, what we may be able to do is think about doing one of our assemblies every year in this format, which saves us all a lot of traffic and a lot of driving, especially in times of the year where we can't guarantee what the weather's like. So it's something that we're all learning from. Many of you have started to have your meetings on Zoom or some sort of a virtual platform. I'm encouraging clubs to do that, to stay connected with one another. The ability to stay connected is one of the most important things that we can do right now. And so getting together either for a meeting or an FAC or cocktails, we had the fun of coming up to the Five Trails Club this last Thursday or Wednesday and joining them for cocktails, which was great fun. And in my own club, we have a wine tasting group. And last Friday night, we got together, including people from Hawaii, and drank wine and talked for 2 hours and had a ball. So it's all kinds of ways that we can do that and remain the family of Rotary. So I'm up to 91 participants at this point. I just think this is phenomenal, and we'll have some opportunity to share some things with each other later. So I'm going to start off. Yes,
Chris,
Kelly? Yes.
Could I just make a comment about the chat over here? If, because we do have so many people on here and we're trying to pull some questions from that area for Mark during his presentation, if you want to message somebody privately, that's great, but maybe hold off on the messages to everybody about, you know, do you mean a craft beer club? That's a little distracting, Tim, for our presenters to be able to pick out the questions that are relevant to the presentation.
All right. Everybody clear about that? Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
I've got a couple of words I want to share with you in terms of inspiration this morning. And I went and I looked up some things that I thought might be beneficial. The one I want to start off with is actually a quote from our founder, Paul Harris. And I think this is important for us to remember, especially during this time and going forward as Rotarians. So this is what he said. He said, "Rotary changes us and those we serve. I believe we can change the world one life at a time." That really resonated with me when I read that, especially now at this time when so many of us feel isolated, we feel away from one another, and we're looking for ways to reach out and continue to help. And one thing I do know absolutely about Rotarians is we truly are people of action, and it makes us crazy when we can't be active. It makes us nuts when we can't be out doing because we want to be out there taking care of people. We're going to have plenty of opportunity to do that as time goes forward in a safe way. But that's one of the things that I think we also need to be mindful of. We need to be listening to what we're being told by our health professionals, for those that are saying this is the best way for you to do things to be beneficial and really helpful. Because what we don't want is any of our Rotarians to become one of the victims of this terrible disease or be one of the people who's passing it to others. That, I think, is one of the things that would be one of the hardest things, is that because of the nature of how this virus is presenting itself, none of us really know exactly how it is going to present. So following the direction that we have here in Colorado and that you all have in Wyoming and Nebraska, follow those directions, and because that's going to help us get through this even faster so that we can come back together and we can spend that time with one another, which is things we really want to do. So think about that. Kelly, would you do me a favor, since you are a Rotarian, and I'm going to put up a picture of the American flag, and I would like you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would.
Yes. Well, we can't see it very well.
There you go.
Okay, everybody. I pledge allegiance. Well, we got to unmute everybody. Just a moment.
It's okay. All right.
Hey Kelly, if you want to share my, well, that works. I've got a flag picture I can share if you'd like.
Okay, I'm trying to, something happened to my screen.
I have a flag on my virtual background, Rolinda sample. You want to just...
Oh, either one of them's fine.
Well, something really freaky went with my screen here, Chris. Now my computer audio says I'm not there.
Jerry Westbrook is sharing his screen.
Oh, Jerry, you need to unshare your screen. Oh, goodness.
There we go. That's better.
Okay, I'm trying to unmute everybody, and it's my screen's still not coming back.
All right. Well, I've got
Technical
the flag up.
difficulties.
That's all right. The flag's in my box.
I see that.
Everybody can unmute themselves.
Yeah, everybody please unmute yourself. For some reason, my screen, it just now popped back up. Okay.
There's Michelle.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. Go ahead, Chris, put your screen up there, but I think it's going to pop up with me, but.
That's okay.
Okay.
Now it went away. I've got it on my phone.
This is now going to be a 3-hour meeting.
No, it's not. It depends on how long you take.
There we go. All right.
Kelly, I have a screen. I have a picture. Can I share my screen?
There we go. We got
There
it.
we
I
go.
pledge- Okay, I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Very good. We got that done. All right.
painful though it was.
One more little thing. Bill Emsley, Fort Collins After Work. Can you lead us in the four-way test?
Yes, I would be pleased to do that. Of the things we think, do, and say,
Is it the
First,
truth?
truth,
Is it fair to all concerned?
will it build goodwill
and better
will,
friendships.
better friendships.
Will it be
Will it be
beneficial?
beneficial to all concerned?
Very good.
Is
Thank
it
you.
fun?
Is it fun?
Thank you, Maureen. Go ahead and mute everybody, Kelly.
Okay, if I can get back to manage here.
There we go. She's going to try.
Beautiful.
I see it popping up.
There we go.
There we go. It's learning how to make all of this stuff work and work for us. So that's
Well, I didn't realize somebody else was sharing their screen. I couldn't figure out what was going on.
Yeah. I think what you can do as we set up big meetings like this is you can prevent others from sharing their screens.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out.
Exactly. All right. Again, thank you all for being here. We've got more people joining us. We're going to start off this morning. Chuck Rutenberg, our district governor, past district governor and foundation chair, is going to give you a brief update and some words about the foundation. And then Lee Vera Nelson is going to talk just briefly about membership. And I'm going to give you an update of some things, some actions that we have taken at the district level already to help relieve some of the situation around COVID-19. And then we're going to turn it over to Mark Holdt up in Estes Park for the rest of our day together. So Chuck, if you want to unmute yourself and talk a little bit about the foundation, that would be great.
Morning, everybody. First of all, let me apologize up front. I'm going to try and do this without coughing my way through it. I'm not feeling very well. Haven't been for about a week. This would probably be a different kind of talk on foundation than you've ever heard, because we're living in a very different time right now. I don't have to tell you the importance of the Rotary Foundation in our own area and around the world. And I fear, or I don't fear, I assume over the next year or two, it's going to become even more important. Having said that, I realize that there are a lot of people that may not be working, or whose family may not be working. I actually have 2 daughters myself that are out of work right now. What I'm asking you to do really is to think about what you give to the foundation. And if you can continue to give what you've been given, that's really great. If you can afford to give a little bit more, that's even better. But the message I want to get out to the clubs is, if you can't afford it because of your personal circumstance, don't feel bad that you have to cut back. I just hope that, you continue to participate in some way, even a little bit, because every dollar we give goes to making somebody's life better and can even save lives. I guess I ask you just to open your heart, think about, what you can afford to give. I know a lot of us, we're all going to be getting a big check from the government. I can tell you, I don't need that money. I will find a good place for that to go. I don't know where yet. It might go to a local charity. It might go to the foundation. It might go to my 2 daughters. I just don't know. But we all have to look at our own situation and do what we think is right for ourselves and our family. I just ask you to just continue to think about the foundation. It's going to be more important than ever to have the kind of money we have. The foundation is really what makes Rotary different from other charitable organizations. By the way, if you want to contribute to the coronavirus relief, Rotary does have a disaster relief fund set up for that. You'll hear a little bit about that from Chris. I just want you to stay safe and let's all get together at the end of this and celebrate. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate that. And thank you for your service to Rotary as our foundation chair. That's an incredibly important position. And I appreciate you bringing your wisdom and your insight and your commitment to Rotary to that position and for continuing on next year. Lee Vera Nelson, you had a couple of words you wanted to say about membership before I do a little bit of an update on the district.
I do, Chris. Thank you. And I'm so glad that so many of you are able to attend this assembly via Zoom, which is also a great way for clubs to continue to meet virtually, as Chris has mentioned. And I hope all of your clubs are taking advantage of this. And we're all very fortunate to be a part of this learning session. And it's a real bonus to be able to share the workbook with all of your incoming club presidents, boards, and club members. So kudos to Mark and Leslie as well. As district membership co-chairs, Mandy Fable and I are looking forward to seeing the results of the strategic planning that your clubs will be engaging in over the next several months. Growing club membership is an important goal for our district and for Rotary International. And Mandy and I have talked to many of you about this goal, but right now I'd like to focus on the impact that the COVID-19 virus has had on our clubs around the district, because this is affecting every member of our Rotary family. It's concerning and it's heartbreaking for all of us. All of the clubs in our district have stopped face-to-face meetings and have moved to some form of virtual meeting, or in some cases, the clubs are just not meeting at all. If your club is not meeting right now, I would like to encourage you to do what you can to resume your meetings using Zoom or any other conferencing application. I have no doubt that most of you consider members of your club as your Rotary family, and being disconnected from them is difficult. Here's something else to consider. If your club does not meet during this time, some of your members may start to feel disconnected, not only from the members of your club, but also from Rotary. And these members may become so disconnected that they don't return once we are past the danger and your club starts meeting face-to-face again. I hope your club does not lose valuable members because of this unavoidable disconnection. If your club is not meeting now, or you're aware of other clubs that may not be meeting virtually during this time, please reach out to me or Mandy or District Governor Chris, as he just mentioned, so we can offer some suggestions to help your club get started with some of these virtual meeting options. If your club is meeting virtually, please check to see who's attending your meetings. I know attendance at club meetings is no longer required, but again, during this time of social distancing, it's easy for people to feel disconnected. There is an option in Zoom that will let you provide a meeting attendance list and have this list, or hopefully this list can help someone from your club be aware of members who have missed a meeting or maybe missed several meetings. So someone in your club can reach out to them via email or call that member and let them know that they were missed and that you look forward to seeing them virtually at the next meeting. Also, please keep in mind that some of your club members may feel apprehensive about trying to attend a Zoom meeting, and take that opportunity to reach out to those members and ask if you can help them get their laptop, their iPad, or their cell phone set up so they can attend your virtual club meetings. Don't let something that can easily be resolved stand in the way of members feeling connected and an important part of your club, because they most certainly are. And reach out to club members that are at high risk due to health conditions or age, for getting sick or contracting this virus. Call or send them an email and ask them if they have any needs like grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions, or running an errand that a club member can volunteer to do for them. Stay in touch with them weekly to make sure they continue to be healthy. This virus can quickly threaten someone who's at risk. And club members who are small business owners or have been laid off from work are now possibly facing an unavoidable financial hardship. It's all making us aware that unavoidable financial struggles can occur at any time for one or many members of your club. These financial situations can result in the loss of valued club members. I encourage club presidents and membership committee chairs to reach out to club members who are dealing with these financial uncertainties and look into different options to help them during their financial struggles so they can remain an active club member. I have no doubt that all of you have been addressing these situations already because you're Rotarians who care deeply about your Rotary family. Our compassion for each other will be what helps our Rotary families survive. So thank you so much for taking care of each other. Chris, back to you.
Thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate those words, and I appreciate the work that you and Mandy are doing in membership. This is one of those times when we really need to take care of the family of Rotary, so let's make sure we do that. Just briefly, I'm going to give you an update on some things that have happened around the district. All of you know and have seen the information that District Governor-elect Bill Schilling has elected to resign from the position and has now moved to Hawaii. I think he's just about ready to complete his 14 days of mandatory quarantine and coming to Hawaii. But because of that, the executive committee has asked me to continue on another year as district governor. So Carolyn and I have agreed to do that. Now we're doing that with the help of some very special people. District Governor nominee Cherie Schill from Thermopolis, District Governor nominee designate Lee Vera Nelson from Fort Collins Breakfast, and past District Governor Barb Redder from up at Casper Five Trails. We're going to be sharing the responsibilities and some of the duties of the district governor. I'll be named as the district governor for Rotary's purposes, but the four of us will be working together to make sure that the district program keeps going forward and that we stay connected as a district, and all the necessary functions are going forward. And I am incredibly grateful to these amazing Rotarians for being willing to step up and take on some additional responsibilities as we go forward into the new year. Some tangible things that we've done in order to really be able to start making a difference to people's relief as far as the things that are beginning to impact people from the COVID-19, and with an eye to the notion that this is a marathon that we're involved in, not a sprint. And there's going to be needs that people are going to be needing over a long period of time. But we thought that we could get started in this way. So yesterday, after consultation with Chuck Rutenberg and with Jim Epstein, our grants chair, our District 5440 donated $10,000 of our DDF money to the Rotary International Disaster Relief Fund. There was a call that went out to all districts and clubs and individual Rotarians to help replenish that fund. The Rotary Board had given $1 million to that fund last week and made it available to anybody who wanted to put in for a disaster grant up to $25,000. Well, it's already gone. You can imagine how quickly that went. So the call went out to ask for additional resources, and we felt that this was a way that all of us in 5440 could reach out and help people around the world. So we have made that donation to the Rotary Foundation for COVID relief as part of the Disaster Relief Fund. Now, at the same time, we also have a grant request in for dollars to go to our food banks in our particular area. And we've already got our $25,000 request in. It's kind of in a holding pattern because they used up the initial $1 million and they're waiting for replenishment. So we may be successful in getting that back to benefit people here in 5440. But in the meantime, because we know one of the places that we can have the most impact now is on helping to provide food to people, the Finance Committee agreed yesterday to donate $28,000, or to set aside $28,000 for us to make donations to the Food Bank of the Rockies, Wyoming, the Larimer County Food Bank, and Weld County Food Bank, as well as additional monies to cover Moffat and Routt County and Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Now these dollars will come, $20,000 will be repaid when we get our DDF in July, and we're using $8,000 of our district reserves. What that means is that $28,000 for what the food banks can do with it will provide about 112,000 meals for people in our district. So that is going to be northern Colorado, all of Wyoming, and touching into Nebraska. This was a way that we thought that we could use our money now to benefit the most number of people. And so we'll be sending checks and letters to the executive directors of these food banks and telling them that this is coming from all of the Rotarians in 5440 to help people with food needs immediately, because what we're seeing is this is going to be the most immediate need. And this was the way for us to touch the most people now. Now, if we're successful in getting the $25,000 grant from the disaster fund, that will also go to the food banks because they're going to be buying and distributing food for many months. We don't know how long this is going to be dealt with. There's a question that's coming up from Ann Bedian: is the money split evenly between the three food banks? It's based on population. So there's about $11,500 going to Wyoming. There'll be about $6,200 coming to Wild County, about $6,500 to Larimer, and then we're making $3,000 additional available over in Moffett and Route and Scotts Bluff. So what we did is capitate it based on the population served by each of those food banks. So we're really spreading the dollars all across our district and benefiting people everywhere in 5440 as a gift from the Rotarians of this district. So I wanted you to be aware that that was going on. And we'll be doing some public service announcement things also and getting it out to our local papers so that we can help that. But, you know, providing the means to provide 112,000 meals for people in the near future is going to be huge because there's a lot of people that are coming to the food banks now. So I will be sending this information out so that you know what's going to be happening precisely with it, but I just wanted to announce that to you today. We're continuing to look for ways to stay connected. The assistant governors and the incoming assistant governors will be meeting on Monday, and we'll continue to do planning and share as much information as we can. I'm connected with a group, as are Cherie and Lee. All the governor line are meeting every Thursday with all of our other colleague governors for the whole Western United States in our 2 zones, with our district, or with our Rotary International director and director-elect. And the last 2 meetings, we've had the Rotary International president and president-elect on our meetings to stay connected in terms of what we're doing as far as best practices in each of the districts in our zones. So I'll continue to share information with you about that also. You all got the information this week that RILA has been postponed until 2021. So that should have gone out to each of the clubs. It should have also gone out to all of the club representatives. So we wanted you to know that this afternoon after this meeting, the Cowboy Country Youth Exchange Committee is going to be meeting, and they'll be discussing the status of the program going forward next year. I want to assure you all that all of our inbound students and outbound students are safe and sheltering. I got a report yesterday from Beth Vandaway, who is the chair of Cowboy Country, and everybody's where they need to be and safe, and they will remain that way as long as things are uncertain. But the big question now that the committee is going to be addressing is how do we handle next year's long range youth exchange? And there's lots of different conversations, and as they make a decision, I will share that with you also. So that's kind of what I know at the moment as far as the district update. We'll continue to stay, I'll continue to provide information to Kelly to get out to you via email. We'll do some things for the newsletter. And please, I just want you to know how important it is for me to be able to continue to see you all here as the family of Rotary. It keeps me going, and I think it's going to keep us all going. And we're all going to do amazing, amazing things for our communities in the next few months. This is where Rotary really gets tested. And don't forget, Rotary in our 115 years went through the Spanish flu in 1918 to 1919, went through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, all kinds of conflicts, other pandemics. We as Rotarians are going to make a difference. We're going to remain committed to eradicating polio, and we're going to remain committed to making the world a better place, and this is how we start. So thank you all for being here. That's going to be enough from me, and I'm going to really enjoy turning this over to Mark Holdt from the Estes Valley Sunrise Club for him to provide an outstanding program on strategic planning. So Mark, it's up to you now. Thank you.
Chris, can I just weigh in for one moment, please?
Yes, ma'am.
It was suggested that perhaps we might want to have everybody to stop sharing their video. This won't keep you from seeing the presentation, but it will help with bandwidth issues.
Okay.
Just during the presentation, then we can all come back to video when we get to the end.
There we go.
Okay, Mark, you'll have to unmute yourself.
First.
There you are.
Okay. Okay, let's see if I can make this work today for all of you. Okay, so Leslie and I are delighted to be with all of you today. In our mind's eye, we are looking out over a crowded auditorium filled with round tables and smiling Rotarians. And we are delighted to be with all of you, even though it happens to be virtual. So we had certainly looked forward to spending actually all day with you today. In fact, this portion of the presentation, talking about having a great strategic plan for your club, is something that is really best delivered over about a 3-hour time frame. But we are doing it differently today, aren't we? So we have condensed this down to a much shorter version. We're delighted to share this with you today. A couple of logistical things as we go through. When you received the invitation for the meeting from Kelly, there was an attachment to Kelly's email, which was a strategic planning workbook. If you happen to have opened that, that is something that we will be referring to throughout the presentation, and we would invite you to have that ready to look at and refer to as we share some of these slides. If you do not have that available, it's all right. Don't disconnect yourself from the call to retrieve it or anything like that, because we do have screenshots of the pages, some of the pages from that workbook that we can share with you. The other thing that Chris mentioned early on is the whole aspect of questions today. Again, because of the number of folks on this call, what we're trying to do is ask you to please submit your questions via the chat box. What we will do with that chat box after the call, Kelly will give us all of your questions. We will group similar questions together and we will respond to every question that people have. And then we will send a group email back out to everyone participating on the call with answers to everyone's questions. Okay, so that's the very best way to handle it. Logistically, we are just blessed with too many folks on this call to stop all the time for questions. I will pause periodically throughout the presentation to give you a couple of moments to jot some questions down. That also allows me to take a sip of coffee and save my voice. So that's how all of that works. So let's just jump into it here. As a way of introductions, Leslie and I are proud members of the Estes Valley Sunrise Rotary Club. I've been a member there since 1987, and Leslie's been a member since 2011. Leslie just finished her year as club president, and she is very delighted to have a lot of extra time on her hands this year that she did not have last year. Our consulting firm, Mountain Sage Consulting, was founded in 2001 on the basic premise that an organization with strong leadership and a bold and compelling plan for the future will generate extraordinary resources and have huge impact. So we are very blessed to do this work. We're happy to share some thoughts with you today as fellow Rotarians on how these three elements can come together to help your Rotary Club. So we wanted to share just a sampling of some of the clients that we are fortunate to serve. And our clients range from startup nonprofit organizations to Fortune 300 companies. But what we wanted to stress about the logos and the clients that you see on this screen, they all share a real common denominator with our Rotary clubs. And that is that every organization you're viewing right now is a membership organization. And they rely on members to thrive and survive in each of their various environments. So what we have tried to do through our consulting practice is help these membership organizations thrive. And we do that by facilitating a planning process that helps them understand their member needs and remain relevant. So the planning model that we're sharing with you today is really built upon our experience working with this variety of nonprofit organizations, but it is also something that Leslie and I have specifically tailored to meet the unique needs of a volunteer Rotary Club working with the volunteer board. So it is designed for Rotary clubs, but it is built upon everything that has been proven in working with other organizations. Having said all of that, we also recognize that as we're sharing this model with you for your consideration, all Rotary clubs are very unique. We're all very different. That's what makes Rotary special. And so what we're proposing is that when you see the model that we're sharing with you, we encourage you to follow that in your own special way. Feel free to adopt this and adapt this model to something that works for your club. The important thing to remember is that you just need to have a great plan that motivates your members and community leaders. So with that, I'd like to share this slide. This is something that we shared at the PETS conference recently, and we asked the audience to help us complete this questionnaire. And as you read through some of these conditions of Rotary clubs, perhaps some of them apply to your club. And I'll just read a few of them. Regular club, committee, and board meetings have become rote and routine. Some of you may have noticed that it's harder to get attendance at your Rotary Club meetings. Some of you might have experienced that it's harder to recruit people to serve as Rotary Club officers. And some of you are experiencing and struggling with maintaining a thriving Rotary membership. So we asked people at the PETS conference to complete this questionnaire. And then just by a quick show of hands, we asked people to say, does your Rotary Club exhibit 2 or more of these circumstances? And we were surprised that a vast majority of the folks in the room raised their hand. So Rotary is a phenomenal organization, but like every membership organization in America, it's hard to maintain membership and to make a huge impact. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. We'll share a lot of concepts with you that are, again, something that we rely on in our consulting practice. Many of you have probably read the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great is the title of the book. It's a best-selling book that he wrote a number of years ago. And he compared similar companies in similar industries, and he was trying to understand why it was under the same circumstances, some companies thrived and expanded greatly and did wonderful things, while other companies failed and they didn't even stay in business. And he wanted to discern what separates the thriving organizations from the failing ones. So one of his concepts that he came up with is what he calls the flywheel effect. And we all know what momentum does in a number of different areas, but momentum is also a very real factor in Rotary clubs. So here's what we envision, that a Rotary club establishes a bold and compelling plan for impact. That's what we're here to talk about today. With that plan, people in the community are inspired and they want to be a part of something bigger. That includes not just your members, but also community leaders and your donors. So your Rotary Club starts with a great plan. People want to be a part of that. As a result of that, your membership grows, you generate more resources, and your club has more impact. And as a result of those things happening, people in the community take pride and they want to repeat the cycle. So that's the flywheel concept that he shared. And that's something that we think is very important, but it starts with having a great plan for your club. So there are 4 aspects that in a perfect world, we would have shared with you all together, all in one day. And these are things that we want to share as we think are essential for having a thriving Rotary Club. So first of all, there's the concept of developing a bold and compelling plan for your club. That is the topic for today. But the other 3 elements are also equally important. And of course, that's having a thriving Rotary Club membership. That's generating the resources that your club needs to thrive, and also having a thriving club board. So each of these support each other. And we would represent to you that all of these are essential to having a thriving club. There's an ancient proverb that says, where there is no vision, people perish. So what I would ask you to think about today is how that applies to your Rotary clubs. And what I would say is that where there is no vision or strategic plan, your Rotary Club will perish. Now, I don't mean to be draconian as it won't exist. I just mean to say it will never reach its potential to thrive. So what we want to talk to you about today is this first element of developing a bold and compelling plan for your club. If we were all together in the room, I would ask you, just by a show of hands, how many of you at this present moment, you routinely have a bold and compelling plan to share with your club? And when you notice the way this question is phrased, it's one thing to have a strategic plan. And I would guess that at least half of your clubs already have a strategic plan in place. The question is a qualifier. Is it a bold and compelling strategic plan? Is it the kind of plan that motivates people in your community to want to be members of your club? Is it the kind of plan that motivates community leaders who want to walk alongside your Rotary Club to have huge impact? And is it the kind of bold and compelling plan that motivates people in your community to contribute to the things you want to accomplish? The other question I would ask is, when you developed that plan, how many of you engaged your top supporters, and I mean in this regard, financial supporters, and community leaders in developing your plan? These are two essential audiences, and they are a big part of the planning process that we are sharing. And so we will review this in more detail later, but the planning model we are proposing, you will see in your workbook and throughout this presentation, there is a role for your board, there is a role for your club, and there are roles for community leaders and top supporters of your plan to be engaged with you as you are developing your strategic plan. So I mentioned earlier that membership organizations are struggling at this time, categorically. All of those membership organizations that I shared earlier in that slide, they all approached us with a common question as we began their planning process. And that is, our membership is stagnant or it is in decline. And the answer to all of those organizations' questions is always a matter of relevance. And membership organizations that are relevant are thriving. Membership organizations that have lost touch with their membership or no longer have the same relevance that they once did, those are the ones that are struggling. So when you think about your Rotary Club and where your membership is, I would say it's directly correlated to the relevance of your club and your communities. So in order to stay relevant, we would say that your organization must be willing to jump to the next curve. Now, curves and this diagram will explain what I mean by that. Many of you are probably familiar with something called a sigmoid curve. It's an old theory that's been around forever. That's why I'm familiar with it, because it's so old. But at any rate, what it is it's an S-shaped curve. So if you focus on this page and look only at the black curve, think of that curve as your Rotary Club today. And the way the curve works is that you start off on the bottom of the curve as a brand new club. So let's say that your Rotary Club is less than a year old. I would say that you are at the very beginning or the bottom of that curve. Everything is new. You're just learning to do everything the first time. If your Rotary Club might be, say, 1 to 5 years old, you would be in what we would call a growth stage. That means you'd be in the bottom third of that curve. Things are going well. You're still taking on lots of members. Things are really working for you. You're expanding in lots of ways. If your Rotary Club happens to be, let's say, very old or mature, as they like to say, politically correctly, then you might experience that you residing at the top third of this curve. In other words, you've been around a long time. Lots of things have been done. Lots of changes have taken place. It might be that you are starting to struggle to retain your membership and your energy and enthusiasm. And then finally, the last phase of the curve, as the black curve starts to bend down, that's what we would call the decline phase. And so some clubs naturally are in decline, and we understand that. Think of that black curve, and you might just make a mental note that when you get together and you start your planning process, we always like to start by just asking people in the room, where does our club reside on that black curve presently? What stage are we in? Are we in infancy? Are we in the growth stage, the maturity stage, or the decline stage? So it's really easy to apply this to a Rotary Club, but think about corporate America as well. And let me just explain. A lot of organizations, very well-run organizations with inspired boards of directors, highly educated people, don't recognize where they are on the curve of development. Some organizations don't recognize until it's too late to jump to another curve. So for example, if we were together in the room and I asked the question, can you please share examples with me of organizations that failed to recognize they were in the decline phase and they failed to jump to the next curve? We can all think of major names in corporate America. Let's talk about Sears. Let's talk about Kodak. Lots of companies like that, Blockbuster Video. And so the idea is that it is important for you as a Rotary Club to understand where you are. It's also important as a Rotary Club and essential in order to remain relevant. You have to jump to the next curve or the next evolution of your club's life. And that is represented by the blue curve. So when we talk about the planning process that we're describing today, it's about helping your club go from the club you are today to the Rotary Club you aspire to be on the blue curve. Okay, that's sort of the theory behind it. There's a bridge, and I'll go back a slide. The bridge is this piece in between. It's what helps your organization go from one club to one curve to the other. And so in your case, we've built a planning model for your Rotary Club around 7 simple steps, and all of them are pylons on this bridge, if you will. And so we'll be walking through each of these steps with you. This is where your workbook will start to come into play as we move through these. And we'll describe what each of these different steps is for you. So it starts, the first 3 steps are assess, focus, and learn. And all of these we've tried to make very simple. So assessing is just you being able to articulate what makes your club unique. So every Rotary Club, as I mentioned earlier, has its unique characteristics. So it's always important to pause to begin with, what makes us special? The next step is to focus. So that's really trying to figure out as a club, because Rotary is so diverse with so many opportunities for impact, this is where you decide as a club, this is where we're going to put most of our chips. We're going to focus in a few areas. The third stage is to learn, and this is where community leaders start to be engaged in your planning process. They help you learn what the opportunities are in your community for impact. Then the next step is to aspire. And again, the aspiration step is just simply defining what that next curve looks like for your Rotary Club. It's defining impact that you wish to make in the future. The engagement piece is where you bring in your club's top supporters. We'll talk about this more when we get to this step. It is essential for the success of your plan ultimately to engage people who are giving you the resources necessary to succeed. Then you need to validate your thinking. You just want to make sure you're on the right path. And finally, once you've done that, you're just sharing your case for support through your strategic plan. So those are the steps. We'll take some time to walk through each of those with you now. I also want to share this schedule. This is a potential schedule that you might visualize. You can truncate this. You can make this happen faster if you wish. You can do it slower. I wouldn't recommend slowing it down too much because you want to maintain momentum. But we wanted to just share a visual of how you could use the next 3 or 4 months, depending on how you wish to handle the process, to get your plan in place so that when you are starting your next Rotary year, you have a lot of the work in place and you know exactly what you're going to be doing. So this is a schedule for you. Okay, we're going to start with the first step, which is assessing your current position. So if you have your workbook, we would encourage you to have pages 4 and 5 open as we talk about this. Assessing your current position is done by conducting some type of an internal assessment about your club and just defining what makes you special. So again, very simple things to do. We're going to share some questions with you that you could pose with your Rotary board, your incoming Rotary board, and your club to help you accomplish each of these steps. So when you want to think about what differentiates your club, you know, some questions you might consider is what inspires us as a club? What are our unique characteristics and advantages? And what is it that we do very best in our community? So when you think about questions like that, of course, it's so important to do something with your club that's inspirational for them. That's all about the energy, enthusiasm, attendance at fundraisers and meetings and impact projects. You also, it's really helpful to recognize that you need to really weigh on your unique characteristics and advantages. So for example, in Estes Park, we have 3 great Rotary clubs. We are very different in how we operate, and we all have different strengths and characteristics, and it's important for us to each acknowledge that and then do things that we can do the very best in the community. So those are the kind of questions you would ask. Another thing that's really important in your planning process is to agree on what is limiting your club. Not always the most positive conversation to have, but we would say it's an essential conversation for any planning process. So be objective and honest with yourself when you think about what are the weak points of our club. And we know we want to do more, but what is constraining us from doing more? And what limits are we imposing on the organization? So this is another conversation to have. So in this assessment standpoint, you're thinking about, wow, what makes us special? What is holding us back? So I want to give you a couple of screenshots from the workbook. So those of you who have the workbook, obviously you're looking at this. Those of you who do not, then I'll just talk through this and you can refer to the workbook later. We've tried to make each of the 7 steps, there are 2 pages for each step. The first page that you're seeing on the screen now is an overview page. The second page is a detailed page. And for the purposes of time this morning, I'm going to share this page for all 7. But I'm only going to share the detailed page for this first step because we don't have time to talk through each of them. You can work through this on your own later, but I'll just explain how the workbook works. So we just start with what you're doing. So you're articulating the unique characteristics of your club. Your objective is simply to figure out what makes you unique. We suggest a time frame. Now here's where you can make this process your own. We all know you have busy folks in your community, but we think a process of about 2 weeks works for this. Who would be involved? Well, again, normally it would be your incoming club president along with the incoming board, and then secondarily, your entire Rotary Club. How would you do it? You'd simply schedule a meeting, get together to start your planning process. During that meeting, you would determine what makes your club unique and what's limiting your club. You'd reach alignment on those things amongst your board. You record the findings. Then at your next full club meeting, you would share with the whole club, hey, we had a planning meeting. Our discussion items were what made us unique and what limits us. These are the conclusions we've reached. Would you agree with those things? So you're letting your incoming board lead the planning process, but you're letting your club inform the planning process. That's all there is to the first step. I would also say that in the era that we are in right now, there's no reason that you can't do any piece of this planning process via Zoom. In the same way that we're having meetings today, you can do all this virtually. Okay, so this is the page that, again, I'll just share one of these during the presentation. I wanted to let you know what is available for you in the workbook in a more detailed sense. And so this page mirrors the previous one, but it describes in great detail who would be participating in each step and exactly what you would do, what the conversations would look like, and so forth. So again, we've tried to make this very straightforward and simple. We're not meaning to be prescriptive and saying that everybody has to do everything on every page. But if you wish to have a simple process to follow that you do not need to invent on your own, that's why we put the workbook together for you. So for each of these, I also just want to share with you an example, because I think these really help make the concepts real for you. So for each of the 7 steps in the planning process, Leslie and I wanted to share with you a real life example of how this worked for a real client. So in this case, one of the clients that we had was a Habitat for Humanity in Buena Vista, Colorado. So, you know, as I'm sharing these examples, think of the correlations and the similarities between what they struggled with, what you might be going through, and how you can learn from their successes. So this was a great organization. In their own right, they were doing okay. I wouldn't say they were thriving as an organization, but they weren't struggling. You all understand the wonderful Habitat for Humanity model. You raise money in a community, you build homes, you give these homes to worthy families, and it's just a wonderful thing. So that's how they operate. When we met with them, we started by, again, same 2 steps. We asked them to start in identifying what makes them very unique, what differentiates them. And one of the things that, you know, came right to the top is that they're the only nonprofit in that county that their exclusive focus is on affordable housing. So certainly that was a unique characteristic. They also had the benefit, of course, that Habitat for Humanity is a national organization. No one understands how to build affordable homes better in all different shapes and sizes than does Habitat. So they had the benefit, not only were they the only organization doing it in the county, they had the benefit of all the national backup and support. Sounds a little bit like Rotary, doesn't it? And then they had connections across the county. So that was something that they thought, these things, there were others, but I'm just listing a few of them there. So then when we talked about, well, that's great, but why aren't you doing more? And of course, the reality was very stark for them. It takes a lot of money to build a Habitat home. For those of you who are wondering, to build a Habitat home in Chaffee County costs $350,000. So they could only raise enough money to build 2 homes a year. And we all know what affordable housing is needed in each of our counties. And for the 2 families who were fortunate enough to get those homes, they changed their life and rocked their world. They were not having much of an impact, however, in meeting the backload of affordable housing in Chaffee County, which at the time we did this plan was about 1,400 homes. So they had a lack of a bold and compelling plan for the future. And as a result of that, they had a hard time accessing people in their community who could make the kinds of gifts that could really change the landscape. So that's the conversations we had. So what they did is they decided to change and pivot how they operated. And rather than be a builder of affordable housing, they positioned Habitat for Humanity in Chaffee County as a convener of people who build homes for affordable housing. It was a very essential pivot for them to make. And they made it through the planning process. They realized that if they brought all the people together in the county, the people in city government to work on rezoning, builders, construction, supply, manufacturing firms, if they brought everybody together, they could have a much larger impact. And as a result of doing that, they also changed how they built homes. They were able to build roughly 3 times as many housing units in the very next year as they did the previous year, simply because they went through a process and they assessed what they were doing well, what made them unique, and what was limiting them. So that's just an example for you on the first step. I'll pause here, and just if you want to take a moment and jot a chat question down, we'll let you do that for just a second, and then I'll race right along.
Hey, Mark, one of the questions is, I don't see these questions in the notebook. Can we have these sent to us? And that was referring to number 1, assess characteristics.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that question, Leslie. So 2 things for you. Number 1, we're recording this whole session today. So this whole Zoom meeting will be recorded. Number 2, we are delighted to make this presentation available to everyone. And I will condense it into a PDF version so that it won't jam up your email, and we'll send everybody the entire presentation. We're delighted to do that for you.
Also, a number of people want a copy of the workbook.
That's great. And I would say that 2 things. When you received your Zoom meeting invitation email from Kelly that you used to log on to this meeting, there was the workbook attached to that. To make it easy for you, we will also resend the workbook along with the presentation. Okay, thank you for those questions. In the interest of time, I'm going to just race along here. The second step is just to determine your focus. So this, again, is not a complicated step, but it's just a very essential one for every club. And we know that, you know, some clubs really latch on to one idea in the community or one idea in the district or maybe something international, but it's important to determine the focus for your club. And then based on that focus, you build your plan around that. So if you were in the workbook, you would be on pages 6 and 7 now. So when you're thinking about the 3 areas of your impact, I have several slides to illustrate this, but essentially, I think it boils down for most Rotary clubs. Do you want to focus most of your attention on local impact? Do you want to be part of something big in the district as your primary focus? Or do you want the primary focus of your club to be international? There's not a wrong answer to that question, by the way. That's just whatever works the best for your club. And so once you figure out the areas of focus, then it's just about determining how you distribute your time and resources. So you want to know, for example, what do you want to be known for in the community? What do you want when people think of your Rotary Club, what do you want them to think about? And that's another way of defining your focus. It also helps you understand how you spend your time. And again, this varies. We've experienced this in our Rotary Club. It changes over time, and that's perfectly fine. So if you think of these 3 circles of having local impact, and that means finding a project right in your own backyard to own and be proud of, or maybe multiple projects locally. You might also want to have a big impact on some district initiatives that are taking place. Chris mentioned some of those just a moment ago. Or you might say that, gosh, our club really wants to take advantage of the fact that we are worldwide. We want to have a presence internationally. And so in most clubs, you'll find that those circles aren't equal, right? So many clubs will say strategically, as part of their planning process, we intend to have our allocation of time, resources, club member attention look like this on this slide. So we want to be primarily a local club We'll do some things in the district and, you know, maybe do something with a foreign exchange student, have a more worldwide impact. That's fine. You might think, no, for us, in our community, it works best for our Rotary Club to really focus on things happening around the world. That's what motivates our members. That's why they come to club meetings. So here's how we are going to distribute our time. And of course, for others, you have something that looks like a district focus. So what I would say is that, again, there's not a right or a wrong, but strategically, planning is always about resource allocation. And so you want to say early on, as you're developing your plan, which of these clubs do we want to look like, and how are we going to allocate our resources throughout the year? So it's a pretty simple step in the planning process. You can also appreciate, though, how important it is and really essential for you to reach alignment with people in your club and your community about where the focus for your club should be. So now we're not talking so much about what you do in every area, but we're just narrowing down how we allocate our time, which areas we focus on the most. So in your workbook, you'll see the page that we have there. Again, the objective is just to come up with your primary focus. Again, might take a couple of weeks for you to accomplish that between the time you have a meeting and then you share it back with your club. You're going to have the same folks involved as you did in the previous planning step. I would encourage you to not shortchange this conversation too much. The best planning outcomes that we achieve in our consulting practice always come from generative thinking that happens by really engaged people at meetings. So I would encourage you to have a special meeting to talk about where can we really have the biggest impact. Reach alignment on that as a planning board. Take it again back to your club, get their reaction to that. So the outcome that you're looking for is just a clear focus on which of these three areas you want to pursue. A quick example I will give you in this regard, another real life planning example, is a great organization called Lutheran Family Services in Denver, Colorado. This is a regional organization. They are very large. They have a huge presence. And during their planning process, they had exactly the same kind of conversations that we are talking about here. You know, I mentioned before, they talked about what makes us unique, but then for them, the biggest question was, what do we want to do in the future? So this particular organization served a very diverse population. They had probably 30 or 40 services that they provided. So the biggest challenge in the planning process was to decide which of those services they should continue providing, but also what new opportunities were they not even thinking about that they should be considering. So when we started working with them, part of their conversation was, gosh, you know, we're doing a lot of things well, and we don't want to lose track of anything great that we've been doing that has made us successful in the past. And so they came up with this wonderful list of 6 characteristics, and they said, gosh, we're not hurting, we just want to do even more. And I think a lot of your Rotary clubs are probably in the same position, right? So a lot of your Rotary clubs are doing so many things well, and as part of this planning process, we just encourage you to say, what is it about us that makes us unique that we want to make sure we continue to use and build on in the future? We also then, through kind of a complicated process, trust me, it took a little bit longer than the one we're sharing with you today, but at any rate, we helped them identify what their best opportunities for impact were. And these are brand new services that they never provided before. So how did we do this? We brought together the kinds of people that I'm talking about in this session today. We engaged their board, we engaged a lot of their volunteers. We also engaged people that they served, and we engaged other providers that were working with them to help us identify the 3 biggest unmet needs in the Rocky Mountain region. They came up with these 3: youth transitioning out of foster care, refugees trying to be resettled, and services for older adults. I mentioned we brought in some special people to help us do the planning. This is just a couple that we engaged in the planning process. They were longtime supporters of the organization, and they were certainly strong community leaders and had great insight as to what the organization might consider doing in the future. And we engaged them directly in our planning process. The result for this organization was very dramatic for them. They had never had a capital campaign where they went out and asked for a bunch of money. So they had their first ever capital campaign for $1.5 million to pay for these 3 brand new innovative services. All of these services, by the way, no one else is doing. So they're really pilot programs. They strengthened their relationships with their donors because they engaged them in the planning process. They had vastly improved financial performance. And that's because we encouraged them to stop doing some of the services that were really hurting them and to do more of other services where they were really making a lot of money. So, and the bottom line is they reallocated their resources to highest and best use. So just another fun example. So the third step then is to learn. And so this is where you start to engage your community leaders. And I will just imagine, and I'll just walk out on a limb here, that this perhaps is not being done in the majority of your Rotary clubs right now. So I want to really stress this point. It is really essential to learn about the opportunities in your community. And, you know, I know on our Rotary board, we have a nice representation of community leaders, but it is by no means complete. So here's some questions that you can do to learn about what your opportunities are in your community. First of all, it starts with just identifying who you wish to engage in the process. So I'm not encouraging you to have a huge auditorium or let's say a Zoom meeting with 100 participants like today, but I am encouraging you to start with who do we have in our club that are community leaders? Who are community leaders outside of our club that might relate to an area of interest and focus we have? And think about what you need to learn from them. And then what you're simply doing is you're just learning about from them the opportunities for impact. So you're listening and you're learning what are their most pressing unmet needs. What would be the impact if these needs were met, and how could our Rotary Club partner with them? So I'll give you a quick example of our Estes Valley Sunrise Rotary Club. Our particular club, if we had those 3 circles, I would say we're more like the first circle. Most of our time and energy is local. We participate in some district initiatives, and we have and do some things internationally as well. But I would say 70, let's just take a stab, 75% of our club's time is probably on local areas. Further, within local areas, we're passionate about youth in our community. So if people ask, what is Sunrise Rotary all about? We would probably say primarily supporting youth in our community. When we decide what we wish to do to support youth in our community, we engage community leaders such as people in the school district to tell us what the needs are in the school district. We engage people who are nonprofit leaders serving youth in our community to help us understand how our Rotary Club might walk alongside them. It's simply taking a step to work with community leaders in a more informed and intentional way to help refine your strategic plan. So the page simply looks like this. Again, the planning phase is to learn about the opportunities from your community leaders. A couple of weeks, who would be involved? Well, in this case, your incoming president, incoming board, and community leaders. Action steps are to identify the ones you want to engage and learn from. Schedule a session where you can just listen and learn about their needs and opportunities for impact. So what this step does is it simply helps you refine your plan to the very, very specific needs of the audiences you're intending to serve. So that's primarily what the learn phase is about for a Rotary Club. An example that we would give you, a really fun example, We have a local marketing district here in Estes Park, as many resort communities do. And they're in the destination development business. That's what they would say. So when we worked through their planning process, we did precisely the same thing. We talked about who are essential community leaders that we need to listen to. So trust me, they had a great board of directors that was representative of the community. And we could have hammered out a plan in the boardroom without community leader input. I would say, however, that would have been a big mistake, because when we reached out to community leaders, it helped us refine and sharpen of our plan. So when we really did listening and we really got into the learning phase, a few things came that were just top of charts for people. We need more visitors, not just to come to Estes Park, but the key to business is we want them to stay overnight. And we hope, by the way, all of you come to Estes, and we hope you stay overnight because that's where the money is. Then the next thing is they want more shoulder season activities. And so those are things to do in the off season, and they want more attractions and activities. So how that refined the plan is they listened to all of that, and these are the kinds of real life projects that happened as a result of doing that. So one of the things you can see is a venue for outdoor performances. They built a new conference center, and they also built, as you can see, a kayak park. So at any rate, these are just examples of an organization listening and learning from community leaders. So it's time for questions now. Leslie just handed me one here that I'm going to read. It says, we appreciate long-term planning, but we are in crisis mode. How do we stay afloat? Can you address this? We will try to do that. Great question, Justice, by providing some options for you in our written responses. What I would say to you, just off the top of my head, is that, again, being relevant right now in the next 12 months may certainly look different than being relevant in business as usual with your Rotary clubs. So you may need to dial down and sharpen your focus in a few areas where people can see immediate need and a visual impact. I think there's probably no better example of that than Chris just shared in what the district is trying to do on a district level. So that's an example. I'm sure the district has lots of other things in their planning process, but right now they found something in the form of support to a food bank that's immediate, it's omnipresent, everybody understands it, they're going to get something done about it. So one quick response to you would be that you can use the same process we're talking about, but you might, instead of trying to plan for your Rotary Club over the next several years, which we always encourage, you might spend an awful lot of your immediate time and focus thinking, how can we address something very quickly right in front of us? How is our Rotary Club going to respond right now? That also, I would say, is something that you would definitely need to do with your community leaders and your key supporters. Those are two key audiences, and I wouldn't guess at what the community needs. I would have meetings with your leaders to determine what they need right now. That's a very good question. I can't really do it justice right on the fly here, but I think that's a great question. Les, are there a couple of other questions that people have in the chat that you want to read out?
Yeah, and so I wanted just to reiterate John Trone's question, which you more or less answered. He just said, I agree with the need for strategic planning for long-term viability of a club. Currently, though, clubs like ours are in crisis mode. Businesses are in financial trouble with members having similar issues because they are either laid off or their own business is struggling. This will translate into lower donations to club charities and possibly member resignations. With no in-person meetings, it is also hard to keep members engaged. We expect meeting disruptions possibly all year. We expect to lose members due to finances, health issues with the virus, and loss of engagement. We are focusing on keeping the ship afloat and mitigating current issues. So if you can give us some tips how to deal with this crisis while keeping the long term in mind, we would appreciate it. So that is the fuller question that John Trone asked you, which you addressed, but I just wanted you to hear the fuller one. Jim asked this question. Clubs have been around a while and they have a lot of projects and activities already in place. So it's hard to have just a few areas of focus. How do you deal with this?
That's great. And I think one way to deal with that is certainly to just have a very good, honest assessment of which of your areas of focus continue to be great for you and really motivate and inspire your membership and donations and community engagement. So if your present projects are doing all that for you, you don't need to reinvent the wheel and switch to having a brand new project just to have something new to share. For example, Estes Valley Sunrise Rotary, we haven't dramatically changed our club's focus for at least the last, I'd say 10 years, because it really works for us. It is what we're known for. Our club members still love to participate in it. They like to show up and do those things. We have, however, had other things we've done as a club that have not, just really resonated strongly. And so part of it is just in your planning process is just to ask the question, are all of these things we're doing still really contributing to our thriving club? Or are some of these things maybe getting a little long in the tooth, maybe activities that used to be inspiring and fun and engaging 2 or 3 years ago, but we're having a hard time getting volunteers to sign up in our club to carry out XYZ. Impact activity. If you start to see that and experience that, then it's just a matter of saying, maybe it's time to sunset some of the things we're doing and spend more resources on things that we love doing and maybe come up with 1 or 2 new things.
Excellent. 2 more questions real quick. Regarding the circle diagrams, do you recommend that we do one breakdown for how we spend our money and another for how we spend our time? And that comes from Carl.
Great question, Carl. And I understand where you're going with that. Time and money are not always the equal things, right? So it can be fine. I don't have any problem with differentiating and recognizing that a lot of your financial resources might be more heavily weighted to one area, but a lot of your club's time, your members rolling up their sleeves, doing things might be in another area. I think that's all fine. The primary thing is your club aligned around that? Are they motivated by what they're doing? And if that's the case, it's great. You can have both of those things. I have no issue with that at all.
Great. And the last question is, another dimension that I think matters is how much we do ourselves versus how much we leverage through partnerships. But that's also a how-to question. And that question comes from Joe McCarthy.
Fabulous question, Joe. So leveraging of the partnerships is absolutely about what we spoke to when we engaged community leaders. And so I think that's the best way for your club to figure out how they can leverage the impact you're making and have a bigger impact. So, for example, when we're working to try to support youth in the community, there are lots of things that our club members might think are just the very best thing for us to be doing. But when we talk to teachers and we talk to leaders in the school district, they're able to augment our thinking and say, we like that. Thank you for helping us in the way you have been. But where we really need help, and where we really see an opportunity for alignment here is, would you consider shifting a little bit and doing this in partnership with us? And I think, to your point, that's how you really leverage your club, and you're keeping it fresh and relevant in doing so as well. And it's just about building those relationships I don't have perfect examples for you now, but I know that that is something that we do with some degree of intentionality in our club. Great question.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. So let me go on to some of the fun part, which is the aspire. So now what we're really doing here is we're defining the second curve for your Rotary Club and the aspirations of what you would like to do. So you've already decided your general areas for impact, local, district, world. And now what you're doing is you're refining your thinking. You've listened to people in your community, and you're matching the needs with your club's unique characteristics. So this is the finer art, if you will, of the planning process. And through that, you're coming up with your best plan for impact. So in your workbook, this is pages 10 and 11. Some things that, you know, again, what you would just be doing is you're just making a list of opportunities. And we like to do this with clients. It's, if you will, just think of it as a dream list, but if your focus is on local things, just make a list of here's all the local needs. And, you know, it might be education, it might be hunger, it might be help for elderly, whatever that happens to be. But then once you get those needs listed, you're trying to dial down and to say what projects are a natural fit for our club. And you're getting agreement on which projects then you recommend to the club. So you're just dialing it down. You're doing that in an informed way. So for our Estes Valley Rotary Club, our focus is local. Our impact is youth. We've talked to the school district. We have some very specific ways that we think we can impact the school district and also make the best use of our members' time. So the planning workbook, again, this is the aspiration stage. You're really drawing in that next curve. A couple weeks to do this. The folks that you are working with, this is more internal, but you're working with your incoming board president, club, and then the entire club. You're scheduling a meeting, making a list of your potential opportunities for impact, and then just making this matching game. And again, as I mentioned earlier, strategic planning is always about resource allocation. So how are you going to allocate your time? And you reach alignment on that. As simple as this sounds, I would represent to you that one of the ways that membership organizations start losing members is when they just simply don't have alignment around something exciting and impactful that they all want to do. So if you think about, if you did nothing else in your planning process, but come up with great opportunities for your club's impact, that your entire membership was aligned around, think of what that would do for energy, enthusiasm, membership growth, membership retention, fundraising, and impact in your community. So a very simple step. I think this is one of the really fun ones. This is where your Rotary Club decides precisely what kind of an impact they wish to have. So many of you I know have probably been to the YMCA of the Rockies at some point in your life. We are blessed in Estes Park to have this right in our own backyard. We also did the strategic plan for the YMCA of the Rockies many years ago. And fascinating organization, a large organization. They have 250,000 members that are part of YMCA of the Rockies. If you've been to either property in the last, I would say 10 years, you'll see a thriving organization. You'll see a lot of brand new, beautiful buildings. You'll see new facilities. They are financially strong. Their membership is growing. When we initiated the plan, that was not the case. The buildings were in disrepair. The finances were in very bad shape. I can share with you that they were, let's just say, on the financial brink. They had limited cash resources. They were not raising much money from their members. Their facilities were in a condition that they were losing a lot of their business. So they desperately needed to come up with some bold and compelling aspirations. I will also share they were 100 years old. So sometimes age is a benefit, sometimes it's not. But at any rate, what we did is we came up with, through the planning process, We engaged their membership deeply in this in a number of different ways, but we came up with a list of bold and compelling aspirations. And these are pretty audacious when you think about it. We wanted to be the #1 family reunion destination in the world. That's an audacious goal. I will tell you that they essentially have met that goal. However, if you read the New York Times, LA Times, Boston Globe, Nick Jr. magazine, they are listed as the #1 family reunion destination in America. They also wanted to be the home away from home for conferences, and they wanted to create unifying experiences for the families. So if you think about this, they wanted every family that comes to their property to have the best memory of their family life occur on our properties. So big goals. What was the impact? And the sharpness of that focus, I will say, helped drive all our other decisions. There were actually 9 other goals than the 3 I listed here. But these sharp goals helped us not just say generally what we wanted to do, but we also helped find out exactly what needed to be done. So all of the property improvements were surrounded, the physical property improvements were all driven by those aspirations. The organization was willing to take on a phenomenal amount of debt to do this. The project cost approximately $58 million. And the connection, and we made a connection then between our strategic planning and fundraising endeavors. So we got a lot of input from our members. So we did a lot of listening to members. We were a membership organization. We had not done this very well in the past, and that's why our membership was in decline. They had made too many assumptions at the board level. We think our members want this. We think we should do this for our members. And as obvious as it may seem, they weren't really listening to their members. They were just listening to their board. So we got member input on what they really did want. And our members had great ideas, and they all look like projects on this page. And whether it be a yurt village, a youth activity center, climbing walls, new water parks. The nice thing about this page is that everything you see on this page not only happened, but our members paid us for it. So what I would say to you in terms of resources, there is a connection, and it's the next step we're going to talk about here. There's a direct connection between when you engage the people who support your club the most in your planning process and the amount of resources your club will raise to meet all of your aspirations. So this chart is just representative, and you know, not everything happens to this degree, but I will share with you that in 2001 and in the years prior to that, the YMCA of the Rockies was raising every year about $500,000 from their members. This may seem like a lot, but it was really stagnant. We started our planning process, as you can see there, in 2002. And we ultimately had a capital campaign, an intentional campaign to raise resources in 2007 and 8. What I would like you to witness, though, on this chart is look at what happened to giving to this organization during their planning process. Now, I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, Mark, this planning process took 4 years. Well, it actually did. And you know, that's why we have a truncated version for you that lasts 4 months. But the point being, we engaged our members, we engaged our donors, we let them come to the planning table and tell us what they think about our plans. And it was phenomenally successful for the organization. So nice story. Okay, moving right along, as I mentioned, engaging your financial supporters. Very important for you to do that. So first of all, it's identifying who are your top supporters and then finding some way for them to be engaged. So top supporters. For Sunrise Rotary, we raise money primarily through 2 events. We have a arts and crafts festival that we raise money by selling booth rental. That's real simple. We have a Autumn Gold Festival, which we all wish you would come to. And that's usually the 3rd weekend in September. Both of these festivals, a lot of the money that we raise is by sponsorships and people's becoming what we have diamond, silver, gold, all these platinum sponsorships for events. So for us, for our club, our top supporters, we're talking about a list of probably 20 people who give to us. So that might help you identify yours. What we're doing, so we're thinking about who to invite. So in our case, and in your case, I would think of people outside your Rotary Club that are faithfully supporting your club every year. That's one way to quantify the list. Another way to think about it is donors and supporters who have demonstrated expanded commitment. And by that I mean, if you are monitoring who is giving to your club year over year, and you can see that each year or over time, they're making a bigger investment in your club, you certainly want to invite them. And a third way is just to think of, oh my gosh, we can't afford to lose the funding from this particular donor or business in our community. And again, for our club, those would be our diamond and platinum sponsors. And that's an even smaller list of people. That's only about 10 people. But if we didn't have those 10 people, our events would make half as much money. So they're really important. So it's just simply a matter of putting together that list. Then finding ways to engage them and ask for their advice. So we do a lot of consulting and philanthropy. And one of the truisms of fundraising is that if you want advice, ask somebody for a gift. If you want a gift, ask somebody for advice. So true. So if you think about your top supporters, you definitely want to be asking for their advice, their input. You also want to treat your supporters as partners in your projects and not paychecks. So if you have the experience where the only time that you're reaching out to your top supporters during the year, or the primary communication you have with them annually is to ask them to renew their gift, then that's a sign that they haven't been engaged appropriately in your planning process or in your club. So it's finding out who these good people are, it's treating them as partners, not paychecks, and finding out how they want to be engaged in your projects. It's really fun when you do this, by the way. Your supporters will be surprised and probably thrilled with the opportunity to roll up their sleeves and work with your club members and be a part of the impact you're making in the community. So the engagement step, very simple. You're inviting your top supporters to, on your planning journey. You're coming up, the audience is your incoming club president, your board, and your top supporters. You identify them, you schedule a meeting to have them attend. And during this meeting, you're sharing with them where you are in your planning process today. You're talking to them about opportunities for impact that you've identified, and you're soliciting their advice on how we can make this impact even greater. You're refining your thinking with the benefit of your donors. And then you're also, very importantly, asking them how they wish to be engaged in helping you with these projects. So it's a fun thing to do. You invite them on the front end, you listen to what their impact is. Another real fun thing that we, are just starting to do with our club is when we give out checks, and all Rotary clubs, gosh, we're good giving out checks. But when we give out checks this next year, we're going to start to have our key sponsors who helped make that event successful attend that meeting with our Rotary Club president. When the check is handed out, we're having our key sponsors be right there too, because they were so important in making that event successful. So that's a very important thing to do. A quick example I will share with you on this example is from a wonderful youth camp company. This is actually, if you're familiar with Chile camps in Colorado, this is a parent company that relates not only to Chile camp, but it relates to 8 other youth camps around the country. So when we did their strategic planning process, they needed to make some very dramatic changes to their camp and actually how they would be operating all their camps. So we needed to get a lot of donor buy-in. So we went through, just as I'm describing here, we just went through their donor list, and we found people who were longtime supporters. In some cases, these are people whose grandparents had given to camp, their parents, they're giving to camp, and their kids and their grandkids are attending camp. I mean, we're talking 5 and 6 generations here. We also invited members of the founding family. We wanted their input. They were, of course, continue to be big donors. We wanted parents and grandparents. We wanted past campers, current campers, and representatives from camp leadership. So the board had already determined a strategic direction they wanted to take. We'd already listened to other community leaders to get that direction. We stopped, and before rolling it out, we invited their donors in to say, how do you feel about it? How would you like to be engaged with this? So we did that by creating a couple of quick task force meetings, very similar to what I'm talking about here. We came up with a couple of task forces, one a transition planning and another development planning. We listened, they loved it. This is kind of a fun quote. This is from the annual report after the planning process was done a couple of years. Nice quote. You know, in summary, our fundraising is increasing, our costs are decreasing, our investment in infrastructure is moving us forward in a positive direction. And again, there's a very tangible return. We did the planning process for them in 2015, and you can see that giving has been accelerated ever since. Okay, rounding the corner here, we're nearing third base and coming toward home. I'll pause for a moment and take a couple of questions if there are any, Les.
Yes, there is. So Liz asked, I love the suggestion to engage community leaders in the planning process. Do you have a template of an invitation that we could use? I would think that a written or personal invitation would be most effective with a follow-up call and not just an email blast. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Liz. Perfect question. And yes, we do have a template that you can use, but your intuition is correct. You need to be very personal about it. And so when we are asking community leaders to attend a meeting, certainly it's a lot more than an email invitation, although we send that out so they understand the details. But it is, as you anticipate, it's a personal call with somebody they know and respect in the community. You're asking them specifically because people get asked to do a lot of these things. But if you're being specific and saying, gosh, Sally, our Rotary Club's in the middle of our planning process, we have some great ideas about how to engage youth in vocational opportunities in the community. You are in a unique position as the, let's say, executive director of the Boys and Girls Club to help us understand where youth are today and what their specific next steps might be. We need your help and your specific knowledge to sharpen our planning process. Would you be willing to give us an hour to talk about this? That's the kind of invitation that really works because you're addressing it specifically, it's personal, and you're also telling them precisely why you need them and not just another person, just another warm body, so to speak. So great question.
Great. And here's another question from Carl. When we have multiple clubs in the same city, we tend to overlap. How important would it be for us to do a strategic planning exercise together? I'm not sure how that might work.
I love the question, Carl, because we have a few clubs, as I mentioned earlier, in our community. I think there's an opportunity, what would be nice in a perfect world, and we're talking about perfection here. I think it would be wonderful if 3 clubs went through part of this process. And let's say they went through exactly up to the, let's say up to the steps we are about at now in the planning process independently. But before they finalize their plan and set it in action, I think a coordination meeting between the 3 clubs where they are sharing, here's our areas of impact, here's how we intend to do this, where you're identifying opportunities where you might be overlapping, in which case, in a perfect world, you might hand off or you might find a specific role for each club to play on the same initiative, and you're coordinating your activities. So in a perfect world, I would see that would work out great for both things because it's just going to strengthen Rotary's reputation overall in the community. And I know a number of you reside, as we do, in communities with multiple Rotary clubs. But again, I think independently planning to a point where you have some clear direction, then having a consolidation or coordination meeting where you're making sure that you're not overlapped and you're collaborating effectively, that's nirvana, I think. And it's easy to say and it's really hard to do.
Great. That's it for questions. I do want to add something for everyone. So when I'm doing a presentation on membership growth and then fundraising, I will be going to clubs that want help, and I can work with you directly. And since Carl came up with this wonderful idea of multiple clubs in the same city, I can help with multiple clubs doing that. So that's just something I'm offering out in the future when we do the membership and fundraising presentations.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Okay, so the next step, step 6, is to validate your strategic direction. And so this is just a matter of circling back one more time. You've listened to community leaders, you've listened to donors, they've given you the input on the projects, and what you're doing is just circling back one more time to solidify that. The validation process is really helpful because it should reinforce for you one of two things. Either you're absolutely on the right track, what you've planned is needed, necessary, and inspirational, or you're going to learn we might need to pivot just a bit. So what you're doing is you're articulating your future aspirations, you're defining your plan for impact in general terms, you're providing background on why you think these aspirations are the best for your club, and then again, you're listening to community leaders. They don't even have to be the same community leaders. We usually think it's helpful, but you can bring in different ones if you wish. But you're just getting a last minute check. Are we sure this looks great? So you're getting their reaction. It's also fun if your club, for example, has 3 local projects that you've come up with through your planning process. This is a perfect opportunity to get community leaders together and say, we'd like you to rank these for us. From your perspective, we intend to do all 3, but which do you think is going to have the most impact for the community? So you're getting their reaction to them. You're getting ideas on how you might actually get them done. And again, you get nice ideas, practical thoughts at that point in time. And again, you're solidifying your partnerships to make these things happen. So the planning book phase, again, you're ensuring you're on the right path. It takes a couple of weeks to do this. It's the same group of people with community leaders. You're having a special meeting. You're articulating your aspirations for impact, and you're asking community leaders just to validate your thinking, and then you're sharing that back with your club. A quick example that I'll race through is just a large organization. This happens to be the Geological Society of America. They are a worldwide membership organization. Again, they have hundreds of thousands of members. They did everything that I'm told you with the planning process. We worked with the board. We got all kinds of donor input, leader input. But then before we rolled it out, we went one more time and we said, okay, here's some things we think are going to be fabulous. These are our aspirations. We want to advance scientific discovery. We want to support young professionals, and we want to influence the linking of policy and geoscience to society. I know it sounds boring as heck, but if you're a geoscientist, they love this stuff. So at any rate, those are their 3 big ideas. We brought a group of people together, and we asked them to validate our thinking. We asked them to validate what they think it would take financially, and could we raise money for this? And so we shared all 3, or actually in this case, they added 1, but all 4 of these aspirations of what they wanted to do with their membership. Very critical for them to do this. They also had membership challenges, maintaining current membership and reaching out to the next generation. Through a process like this, they were able to come up with things that resonated, not just with their current members, but very importantly with the next generation of members. Leslie will talk a lot about membership recruitment of young professionals when we get together, and that's going to be in the fall with you, hopefully in person, and this will tie in directly to that. So the last step is then just to share your vision. And again, this is another one of those where I'm going to go out on a limb and say, many of your clubs may not have taken this last step. So it's a critical one. And it's all about developing a case for support from your plan. And so when you think about a strategic plan, you've made all this work, you've spent all this time to put it together. It should be bold and aspirational. Your plan is helpful to your club. It's essential internally because it helps you allocate time, resources. But your plan has a more important role or an equally important role, and it's an external role. And if you think of your plan as your prospectus for investment in the community, it's your reason for people to join your club as members. It's your reason for community leaders to work with your club. It's the reason for people in the community to donate to your club. So if you transition your plan into a simple one-page document, that's what we're talking about. So you're translating your aspirations into a case for support. You're reviewing your aspirations. And again, if we had lots of time, this would have been a fun breakout session, but we don't, so I'll just fly through it. There's lots of ways to define your aspiration. Is it bold, compelling, comprehensive, clear, urgent, intentional, and unique? We'll go through this with more time at a later date, but at any rate, you are competing, your Rotary Club is competing with every other nonprofit and civic organization in the community for members, for community engagement, and for funding. And so those communities that have the best, clearest, most inspirational case for support will get more of all three: members, community support, funding. So you want to translate your aspirations into something that's really easy and digestible for people to understand. You want to think about how you're going to raise the money and how you're going to share your case for support. Again, this is probably a couple weeks to do this. It's a fun exercise, and we'll give you some templates that you can go through in a moment to do that. But you're just going through and you're saying, wonderful, we have 3 or 4 big aspirations of our club. How can we articulate these in a way that potential members can understand it, community leaders and donors? Last quick example for you is a fun one. This happens to be a great organization in Loveland, Colorado. When we worked with them on their strategic plan, they had an audacious vision that we came up with. It happens to be this building. This is the House of Neighborly Service. They're very busy right now because they serve the 20% of people in Loveland in poverty. Their vision was to have one facility that housed not just their nonprofit, but would be a shopping mall, if you will, for people in poverty, where they could go to see all the different nonprofits to meet their needs. So what we did, we came up with what we thought was a great case for support, but we were very intentional about identifying who would benefit from this vision in the community, what it would mean to the community. We applied those 7 characteristics in a filter, and we developed a case for support to share. We determined a strategy to how we would get the resources. It cost a lot of money to build this building. When we initially spoke to leaders in the Loveland community, they said, you won't be able to raise this much money. We did. It was very powerful. This building exists. It's 62,000 square feet. There are 29 nonprofits serving people in poverty today. So the case for support, these are those 7 characteristics. Again, this is just an illustration for you to use with your club. These are the one-line definitions. So when you think about your aspirations, are they bold? Do they generate excitement? Are they producing alignment? Are they opportunistic? Do they take a sense of urgency? We talked about that earlier with responding to COVID. That might be part of what you need to be doing right now. But these are the definitions. The campaign was really a lot of fun. This is just a one-page case for support. So if you wanted to know what one looks like, this was the handout that we used along with other materials to raise money in the community. We shared the story of this couple, and they were very powerful. You all have stories of impact in your community that are very powerful, but we told this story. The results were phenomenal for them. They raised $3.5 million. They established an entirely new model for care. People from Washington came out to learn about this model of care. They got a lot of national recognition. They have a lot of organizations thriving in that building, and they have 29 organizations working together. This is their contact information. So we are happy to help you in any way we can. We will, of course, respond to your questions. As you are working through the planning process, Leslie would be an immediate contact person for you. If you have questions, we're happy to help you. There's not a cost involved with that. So we're delighted to do what we can do to support our fellow Rotarians. Chris, sir, I'm handing it back to you. We thank you from our home to yours.
Mark, absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for bringing your experience and expertise and making it available to us. This was absolutely terrific. And for those of you that see the little hands clapping, there's a reaction button at the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and you can pick a thumbs up or a clap. And I'm just clapping like this so that people can know how much I appreciate, Mark, what you have provided to us. This is absolutely phenomenal and wonderful. And I was watching the participants. We've stayed consistent at 101 all the way through your presentation. So that's absolutely terrific. Thank you for that so much. And thank you, Les, also for being a part of that. It's great information. Wanted to let you know a couple things before we ring off. Karen and Brenda Laird, our district trainer and trainer-elect, will be putting together an evaluation form for you to use and sending that out later this week. We would very much appreciate you spending a little time filling that out and getting it back to us. Let us know how things worked and what would be better. This is the first time for us trying this, so thank you for that. I particularly want to thank those people who did put this event on today. There was a lot of work that went into this. Karen Tressler and Brenda Laird are trainers for our district. I appreciate the comments from Chuck Rutenberg, our district foundation chair, for his comments on the foundation, and for Lee Vera Nelson on her wonderful comments on membership. And most especially, I want to thank Mark and Leslie. This was a lot of effort that you had to do. You were planning for this to be 2 on-site visits, and you managed to bring this into an absolutely fabulous presentation to do this online, and you have my personal thanks for doing that. You guys are awesome Rotarians, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And last but not least, I want to always thank Kelly Kegris, our district secretary. She's the one, the technical wizard behind all this, that makes so much of this happen, and we absolutely could not do that without her. So thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. We are going to keep the room open afterwards. Kelly's going to sign off, and she's going to stop recording, but we're going to keep it open so that we can go back to John Trone's question about how to deal with the short-term